Hello everyone, welcome back. We're going to be covering protocols and procedures for watercraft decontamination. So the first protocol that we're going to cover here is what do you do if there's an issue with the pressure washer? What happens when there's a broken part, if it sounds different, it's running rough, maybe the wand isn't discharging water, or you're having issues starting it? What do you do at that point? First and foremost, if any of those issues are to arise, make sure to contact your supervisor before going forward using it in any way, shape, or form. Continuing to use the pressure washer when it has a broken part or isn't running properly will almost guarantee increase the damage level and further create additional issues that may arise from that broken or strained part. So ultimately, if there is a broken part or something isn't running right, stop using the equipment. Don't further use it to perform watercraft decontaminations, and always make sure to get in touch with your supervisor and make sure you address those concerns. So the next protocol we're going to address here is what happens if you aren't sure how to use the pressure washer, or maybe you aren't sure how to use a particular part of it. Maybe it's the vacuum system, or if you aren't sure how to perform a particular type of watercraft decontamination. Maybe you're unsure how to flush a jet ski or perform a motor flush on an inboard motor. Or it could be something like decontaminating internal compartments or deconning the trailer. Being an expert is not expected right out the get-go. And we understand that there's going to be a learning curve. This is a lot of information to take in. So the biggest take-home message here is just ask questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question, especially when we're dealing with things that involve equipment as well as your safety. So just if you have any questions, rather than trying to sort your way through it and kind of guess your way, make sure to ask those questions so that you're performing the decontamination correctly. Therefore, it'll make sure that you're doing it safely, as well as being able to perform the decontamination correctly, so you are in fact decontaminating the boat to eliminate the threat of AIS transportation, as well as that you're not causing any further damage to the watercraft. So it's important to note we are not law enforcement. So when people are going through our program, it is a voluntary program. So we cannot force anyone to get a watercraft inspection, nor can we force anyone to decontaminate their watercraft. So if a vessel does come through that allows you to perform an inspection, and say it fails inspection, maybe it has zebra mussels in the bilge, or it has Eurasian water milfoil in the propeller, ultimately you are not allowed to bar them from launching their boat. If they wish to disregard everything that you are saying and still launch their boat, they have the right to do it, and we don't have the authority to stop them at that time. What we do ask of you is just take down all the information you can from that individual. What type of tow vehicle was it? What type of boat was it? A general description of both. License plates are always a great thing to take down in those situations. We're going to need you to set up, start up, and test all of your equipment at the start of your shift when you first get to the launch each day. Being that our program is voluntary, we want to make this process as streamlined and as efficient as possible so that we're not holding up boaters while they're trying to launch or take in their boat. Always make sure to have your pressure washer warmed up, your tools accessible, and prepared for whenever a boater comes in. A common request that we get at the launch is if the boater or someone in the boating party is allowed to operate our pressure washers or equipment to perform the decon on their boat. So in this scenario, no one other than a certified decontamination technician is allowed to operate the pressure washer. Due to liability and safety concerns, we can't allow anyone to use the equipment that hasn't gone through our training program to be able to safely use our equipment. In very rare circumstances, we have had boaters that have tried to take equipment away from decon techs in an effort to perform a decontamination on their own boat. In this scenario, what we need you to do is don't try to take any equipment away from the boater, which may just make this situation go south a lot faster. What we need you to do is turn off the pressure washer and put the key in your pocket. By turning the equipment off and taking the key away, no further decontamination can occur at that point. So that will kind of start to de-escalate that situation. At that point, we would then ask you to notify your supervisor and remove yourself from that situation. All right, so next one here. If you're working at a decontamination site alone, meaning you don't have a coworker working with you, if you have to leave your station for any reason, if you go to the bathroom on your lunch break, or maybe you're assisting someone down on the boat launch that needed help with their boat, make sure to take the pressure washer key with you. In rare circumstances, we have had people that have gone up to a unintended decontamination site and turned on the pressure washer themselves to use it as a self-service piece of equipment. So as mentioned in the previous slide, we don't allow that. You have to be a certified decontamination technician through our program to operate our equipment. So if you leave the site and there isn't another coworker watching over it, make sure to take the key with you. For our program, we're not using any sort of chemical solution to be able to clean or decontaminate the watercraft. We're solely relying on the temperature of the water to kill the aquatic invasive species and the pressure of the water to remove it from the vessel. For exterior surfaces, hull, motor, and trailer, we're using high pressure 140 degree Fahrenheit water for a duration of 10 seconds. So what this means is we're using the variable adjustment wand turned on to the high setting, 3000 psi, turning the thermostat control to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, and then spraying the infected areas for 10 seconds of exposure time to make sure that that aquatic invasive species has properly been killed before it's removed off the vessel. For internal compartments, such as the live well bilge or motor intake, we're using low pressure water at 120 degrees Fahrenheit for a duration of 30 seconds. So in this scenario, we're typically using the low pressure hose attachment with the thermostat set to 120 degrees Fahrenheit and washing locations such as the live well with that 120 degree water for 30 seconds. Essentially what we're doing here is for these sensitive areas that have rubber gaskets or electrical components inside the boat in these closed compartments, we want to make sure we're using a lower water temperature of 120, but still achieving full decontamination with the aquatic invasive species dying by increasing the duration time to 30 seconds so they are properly killed before being removed from the vessel. Listed below are the situations that will warrant decontamination. First is standing water and damp equipment. The most common thing you'll find for standing water is a boater that left their bilge plug in and there was visible standing water in the bottom of the boat. For damp equipment, you'll commonly find dock lines or anchor lines that are still wet from the day's use, or perhaps fishing equipment that's in the bottom of the boat that's still wet. The next is visible inaccessible organic material. So this is aquatic vegetation that you are not able to remove from the boat as it sits. For example, if a piece of Eurasian water milfoil was trapped in between the boat and the bunk of the trailer, you're probably going to be able to remove some of it, but there's still going to be viable fragmentation in between the boat and the trailer. The next situation is visible small-bodied aquatic invasive animals. So this could be zebra mussels found on the outside of the boat or perhaps in the bilge water. The last situation is bait fish or other organisms used in the taking of sport fish. This could be bait that's in the live well or a bait bucket in the boat itself. We're now going to cover some of these situations in greater detail, but for full step-by-step instructions to how to perform these watercraft decontaminations, refer to the Watercraft Decontamination Manual. Watercraft decontamination for standing water in interior compartments. So we're going to be flushing these interior compartments with low pressure 120 degree Fahrenheit water for a duration of 30 seconds. So the reasoning behind this again is that a lot of these internal compartments are very fragile. They can have electronic components to them. as well as silicone gaskets and seals that can break down in higher temperatures. Once the compartment has been allowed to flush for 30 seconds, make sure that the drain plugs are all removed and that the compartments can fully drain before proceeding to any further steps. If there's any AIS still present in those compartments, make sure to reflush those until there are no visible AIS left. Watercraft decontamination for standing water in outboards, inboard outboards, and inboard motors. First, you're going to attach the lower unit flushing muffs or the fake lake, depending on the situation and motor at hand, to the pressure washer and hose. You're then going to want to secure those muffs or fake lake to the lower unit intake vents or the intake vent on the bottom of the inboard motor. Set the water temperature to 120 degrees Fahrenheit and turn on the water, allowing the flow of water to enter the water intake port before the boat motor has started. Once the water is flowing into the intake port, start the engine of the motor of the boat and allow the engine to flush with 120 degree water for 30 seconds before turning the engine off. After turning the engine off, you can disconnect the water supply from the intake. Allow the engine to completely drain. Watercraft decontamination for standing water in jet drives. The most common jet drives that you're going to come in contact with are going to be personal watercrafts, a PWC, which is most commonly referred to as a jet ski, as well as a jet boat, which is just a recreational bow rider style boat. The first step is to connect your hose to the water intake port on the PWC or jet boat. Typically, they're going to be located underneath the front hood of the jet ski or underneath the seat of the jet ski, or if it's a jet boat, it'll likely be in the engine bay. Another very important note here. So for all jet drive systems, it's a reverse flushing system of inboards, IOs, and inboard engines. So what we're going to be doing here is instead of starting the water first and then turning on the motor of the boat, we're going to be doing that in reverse. We're going to start the motor of the jet ski first and then add water to it. Once you add the water to it, it's going to be 120 degree water for a duration of 30 seconds. After that 30 seconds has lapsed, you're then going to do the reverse then as well. You're going to turn off the water flow and then allow the jet ski to run for 15 seconds before killing the engine of the motor. After both the water and the engine have been turned off, allow the jet ski to fully dry. Watercraft decontamination for damp equipment. So we're going to be using 140 degree Fahrenheit low pressure water to rinse all equipment for a duration of 10 seconds. So damp equipment, it could be your bow lines, it could be your anchor line, it could be a life jacket, floor mats from in the boat, anything that's been in contact with water that day and hasn't been dried. Due to the fact that these pieces of equipment aren't internal compartments, we're able to use that higher 140 degree Fahrenheit water and just soak them or spray them down for 10 seconds to achieve this decontamination. Watercraft decontamination for inaccessible organic material. So first, you're going to want to remove all accessible organic material by hand first, whatever you can reach. So that's the accessible part of it. But for the inaccessible organic material, this could be fragments of Eurasian water milfoil, for example, that might be caught in between the bunk of the trailer and the bottom hull of the boat. In this scenario, what you're going to want to do is use low pressure 140 degree water to rinse the contaminated region for a duration of 10 seconds. Because this is an external part of the boat, you can use 140 degree water because it's not as sensitive of a region. But because you're using 140, even at low pressure, you still only need to use 10 seconds of exposure time to properly kill the viable fragmentation. After soaking that fragmentation for that 10 seconds, you can then switch from a low pressure to a high pressure 140 degrees to try to use the pressure of the water to remove as much additional fragmentation as possible. Watercraft decontamination of accessible aquatic invasive species. So in this situation, the AIS found is accessible. Perhaps it's Eurasian water milfoil, it's wrapped on the axle of the trailer, or it's sitting on the fender, or maybe it's just a piece of milfoil hanging off the propeller. You can then remove that AIS by hand at that point. If it's just a single piece of aquatic invasive vegetation, you can remove it and it doesn't require decontamination. But if you have the ability to, it's always good to perform a localized decontamination at that point to ensure that there's no viable fragmentation left. So what we would recommend is using 140 degree Fahrenheit water for a duration of 10 seconds on all of those external areas of the boat, the hull, the motor, the trailer, and then using 120 degree water for 30 seconds for all the internal compartments. And where these are just isolated pieces and fragmentations, you can then do a localized decontamination for those regions. So if there was only milfoil found on the axle of the trailer, spend a little time to decontaminate the lower part of the trailer, and then give the rest of the boat a thorough inspection to make sure there is an AIS somewhere else. Watercraft decontamination for found bait fish. So if a boat comes in that has bait fish, whether it's certified or not, we recommend decontaminating the water that it's in due to the fact that it is standing water within a vessel. Each decontamination station is set up with a 5-gallon bucket. You can then use that to fill it with water and transport those bait fish into that clean bucket of water. At that time, go back to the boat and drain all water that's within that live well or bait bucket. Once it is all drained, decontaminate the bucket with 120 degree Fahrenheit water for a duration of 30 seconds. You can then add clean cold water to the live well, bait well, or bucket, whatever the bait was originally in, and then return that bait fish back to the boater. So a full decontamination includes all of the following. That would include removing all accessible organic material by hand, spraying of the exterior, the hull, motor, trailer with 140 degree water for 10 seconds, flushing all internal compartments, the live well, anchor, locker, bilge, ballast tanks with 120 degree water for 30 seconds, performing a motor flush with 120 degree water for 30 seconds, draining all systems that were washed or flushed, performing a re-inspection, preferably by a second steward or decontamination technician, and then always remind the boater to clean, drain, and dry their vessel every time coming out of the water.